Namaste and welcome to Inspiring Women, produced by Today's Youth Asia. Inspiring Women television show brings to you successful women and inspiring stories on women leadership from around the world. I'm Samiksha and today we have with us Aicha Barthson, a prominent media personality from Cameroon. She specializes in children, women and development issues. Having received her education from London, she has worked at the Cameroon radio and TV network and also served as the correspondent of the BBC. Today, we're discussing on how women have evolved into becoming change makers and mainstream leaders in the modern world. What do you think is the first step towards women empowerment?
The first thing is that the women should be heard. The woman's voice, their choice, and that should even start just at home. If you have a mother, a sister, or a daughter, it's something that should begin at home, because when you want to talk about empowerment, if you want to talk about it only in terms of work, in the working environment, I don't think that's where the exercise should begin. I think it should begin at home, meaning that women's voice, it should start within the family.
As a woman journalist, how is the situation of the woman journalist today different from that in the past?
I think we've moved a big step further up, because when women used to be journalists, like when I started working for the Cameroon radio and television, we had technicians whom in reality when you went to the field, you came back with your work and you had to count on a technician to do the editing, because in those days we used to use what is called as the nagra. So you had to clip. But I think today many women can practically do all the production, go out on the field, come back, edit, which I think for young people who are going to do journalism, there's a big improvement in this field. And I also think that at first many people used to associate journalism to some kind of being beautiful and sitting most of the time as an anchor. But be it today in war zones, you'll notice that many women are going on the field. They are also reporting. When I started reporting, 1995, we were very few journalists that female journalists that were on the field. So I knew mostly all my colleagues from Reuters, somebody like Christina Anampo, and these were the few women that used to run on the field. All the other women chose to stay within the office, do programs where you sit, you write in the studio, you go read. But today, it's moving forward. I think male journalists and female journalists today, there's no big difference. I think everybody can cover the same field.
How do you position women leadership in 21st century?
It happens, you people are in Asia, and as you know, you'll be very surprised actually to find out that there are more women leaders in the Asian continent as compared to even in the West. A country like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and you've seen just in Thailand, a woman has just won an elections. So at first many people thought that we always have to look at the West, even in terms of parliamentarians. Some Asian countries actually have more parliamentarians that are women than even in some Western countries. So I'm looking at women leadership. I think that we are pushing forward, and especially the young generation beginning to understand that, especially young women like you, you're beginning to understand that you can still keep your femininity but still be a leader. I think it's a bit stereotype to always think that the best place for a woman is to be calm and to be at home and to forego a profession. All of you are in a professional school. I can see there are young girls. You come out almost with the same degrees. I don't think in this school there is a difference in department. Like to say girls can only do bakery, while guys become the chefs. Everybody can go. So women, my vision on the women in the 21st century, I think I'm very comfortable with. I think we are pushing forward. I think we have a place, but we still need to move it more. We still need to push it forward and to really let it become just a normal something. It should not be something we keep on comparing. Are we there or are we not there? For me, it should be something just like the voted prime minister is a man. If it is a woman, they should say, oh, it's a woman. They should not be any more surprised. That's where I hope we are soon getting, and we are nearly there.
Being in the field of journalism, you must have a lot of memorable stories with you. Could you share with us the most inspiring story that you have covered?
Working for CRTV, Cameroon Radio Television, I will actually have to put it in two cases. Because when you work for a state radio, where in many African countries, which I should also think that it's the same in many Asian countries, sometimes there's a lot of censorship. And when I came back to Cameroon and I started working for CRTV, I always noticed Cameroon, as you know, it's a country that has a very famous football team. Like Samuel Eto'o, we have very international players. And football is a very pulling force. So every time there's a World Cup, I think the politicians want to use the football. They know that during the World Cup, there will be 1 or 2 months where the whole public is just watching the screen, and then they can empty the coffers and do whatever they want. But I had to cover this story, and I was working in the Central Province, which meaning this radio is in our capital. And they had sent me to cover a particular village where a minister was. He's an origin of that village. And you know, there's a difference when people say I pledge. I say I pledge 1 lakh. It doesn't mean that I've given the 1 lakh. So our president had started something called a coup de cœur, meaning from the heart. So the whole country was contributing money for our national team. But it became political. Because even you went to some minister's village where no money was given, or they gave a very small amount, but they will want us from the state radio and television, depending who this minister was, when we come back to the radio, to increase the amount. Like say they've said they will give 10 lakhs, which is not true. And in Cameroon is a bilingual country, so we always have a French and an English journalist on each story. And so my French colleague actually wrote a very big amount, and I wrote something else. Even though the head of the head of station had told me to write the same figure. And it became a very big controversy because it was on news. So when it went on the French news, it was saying something like 10 lakhs. And when it came for the English news, and when I was filing my report, I said the people only pledged, and it was not even up to 1 lakh. So it created a very difficult situation. I was suspended for some days, but for me, that was my stand, and that's when I knew that I cannot continue to work in the state radio. I started trying to apply for Rai Television, which is the Italian Reuters or BBC, and till I wrote my exams, and I finally went into, I finally got a position in BBC. So this story also, it's something I always remember. There were many other incidents, but this was a very clear case where even a social interaction can be turned political, and which as a journalist is always good not to get caught up, because what I've been taught in the School of Journalism was that you should answer the 5 why question. When, what, how. You don't need to, your own speculation, it doesn't count. I went to that village, yes, how much? What did the people do? I think I answered those basic questions. And when writing that paper, you should write it in such a way that even a 5-year-old child listening to you will get the stories. There's no need to complicate it with big words. Did they give 10 lakhs? No, they did not. They pledged, and they pledged not up to 1 lakh. Okay, that was the information.
What inspired you to take up journalism as your career?
Yeah, my family background is, I think, played also a lot in this. I have a father who used to work for International Labour Organization. So my father is a syndicate. In short, he writes laws that governs rules in the labor place. Meaning that as I was growing up, I saw a lot of my father doing a lot of public talks, maybe going to companies and trying to tell the workers on their rights. And my mother is more of an accountant, but my mother is a traditional ruler. I come from a matriarchal society where it's the women ruling, and my mother is the traditional queen. So I've always seen my mother, like when we went to villages, doing all these big talks, and even being a head accountant for our social insurance, where they pay retirement and everything. When people come for those payments, there's always a lot of talk. And when I was in school, I used to be in the music club. I played in the music band, and I was also in the debate club. But I went to something called Our Lady of Lourdes. It was run by British sisters. And we were lucky in that school in that we had counselors. So I was doing very well in physics, like chemistry and maths. But the counselor could always tell what your pool is, because you might work very hard in the maths or in the literature, but they know that you've put a lot of effort just to make a pass. It's not something that just comes with your natural ability. So when I was in Form 5, that is your equivalent of your 10th grade, I think the counselors could already see that I was very strong in public debate, and they thought I will either be a lawyer or do magistracy or do public relations or journalism. So I think all these factors that I like to talk a lot, first of all, made me want to go into this profession. And I also felt that being a journalist, maybe it will give me room to say certain things that I could have been dying to say and which nobody listens. And when I began even as a journalist, I did a lot of musical program, but even the kind of music I used to play, I played a lot of hard rock. I don't know if some of you listen to hard rock. If you listen to something like Metallica, Megadeth, D.A.D., these are bands that have very subtle music. And you know, the old people, they sometimes don't understand it. They just hear this band going with all the noise, but they never know the silent message, the rebellious message that lies below that music. But I knew that the youth would listen. Because you know, in Cameroon, there are more than 260 tribes. When I see people fighting in Nepal and all these tribal fights, I laugh, because Cameroon is the country with the highest number of tribes. We have 17 million, but there are 260 different ethnic groups in Cameroon. And I've always tried to use my radio program to make the youth understand that it's not, like I would say, it's not the Chetri, the Brahmin, or the something fighting. We happen to have a generational conflict with our parents. Be it the parent coming from different tribes, they have the same mentality. They think that their own knowledge is the best. This is the only way to do it. So we should not, as the youth, we should not fight each other. Just because we come from different tribes, because they as the politicians, or they as our parents, they have some archaic ideas, and they think that that's the only way things can function. They send us to school, but they still don't want to accept the change. As compared to some of us, I think we've done better schooling than some of our parents in their own time. During independence, they needed just minimum education to take the government. But you cannot send your kid to study a master's in political science, and when he tells you that you're not ruling the country well, you go like, what do you know? Children of today, you're very, you know, all our parents say that, children of today, they think they know too much. No. In that domain, when it requires the technical know-how, I think we know better. But our parents maybe have the guidelines, maybe to guide us. But it would be ridiculous that a father who has never studied political science and is a minister will want to argue politics with somebody who has read political science. So for me, this was why I wanted to do this job, because I was also afraid that youth in my country might end up fighting with each other, because I could feel it. Some of my friends will say, oh, your tribe is the ruling tribe. All your uncles are ministers. And I'm like, my uncle is a minister or my father, but I don't agree with them. Like when I used to work in BBC, I had a lot of problems with my own family when I wrote that the electoral box has been stuffed. Even my grandfather would call me and say, what kind of a daughter are you? How can you write that when you know your uncle is the Minister of Interior? I said, but that's what I saw, Granddad. So for me, being a journalist, this was also it. It was to bring my own little change. The little rebel in me, I wanted to do a profession that will give me that voice. And coming especially from a family that rules, I think I know better than anyone how corrupt those uncles can be, you know. Because I've seen them of it. I've seen them renting cars to put people inside to go vote in different packs, while normally during election days people are not supposed to move. So I think that if you are in this kind of a position, you're born in this kind of families, I think you should actually use your own knowledge to expose it or make your family stop it, because we are also responsible for society.
What, according to you, are the most important pointers in being a good journalist?
Well, if we are talking about journalism as a whole, there are many fields. There's investigatory journalism. There are some journalists, sometimes they want to reproduce. There are different, for example, if you are doing a local show for local women in rural areas, that is a developmental journalism, which means that you have to look into the people's problem, listen to them, and then you say it on the radio, what the village, what their aim is. Do they want to build a tank, or do they want to build a bridge? But I think there are certain qualities that I think every journalist must have. And I think that it's not taking side. When you give a story, this is what I learned in school, this is even in the BBC manual, that's the first thing. Like I said, the WH questions, when, how, why. You should be answering these questions that rather than to give people your own opinion. I feel many newspapers in Nepal give a lot of opinion rather than telling us the story and let us be the judge. It's like they tell you a story and they want to give you the conclusion at the same time. Or there you see, then this, and then another journalist write another one. No. An event happens, I think you should write it in such a fair way and take the distance. If you are not sure, you should be truthful. By the time I was putting this story into press, I didn't get the other side of the party, or I was not sure about this point, or they could not confirm this report. I think people will understand. And that story can always have a follow-up. There is no need to want to fill a scope or a particular program, a slot, and then so you invent things to put it there. There's nothing as bad as a journalist that tells lies, because some people sometimes rely on news to know the realities. But if they keep on telling lies, or they keep on putting their own small impression and wanting to enforce their impression on other people, it makes that we end up having a society that does not think. Because they're not doing investigatory journalism. What they're doing is that they're saying, you don't know, we tell you. And that's not true. It can be biased, because there are people who have inclinations, maybe towards some politician, towards some tribe, towards... It's not. So I will always, regardless my own feeling, if I feel that my interest, I have a lot of interest in a story, I would rather not write that story. And I think that journalists should be honest to tell the editor, maybe because I might be biased, because I'm involved in this, maybe I would rather not do this story. Rather than to write a story and I can only see your own public opinion, and I'm not afraid to say it. A lot of newspapers in third world country, including Nepal and even Cameroon, they write at somebody's command. Very few. That's why when I take certain newspapers, like today in Nepal, I have certain journalists that when I take a newspaper, then I open to read their articles, because it's always like a debate. It's more open. Some articles written by specific journalists that I will always read, because they are not giving me the conclusion, they are giving me the facts from both sides, and then let me make my own judgment.
In today's context, there are many quotas or reservations for women in government as well as private sectors. What is your take on it? Is it an effective way of women participation, or do they just get tagged as quotas fulfillers? Yeah,
like we said, I think when we started this talk, we talked about women in the 21st century. Quotas are good in a society where it's been lacking behind. In Nepal, if they impose journalistic quotas, maybe it's because they've always been more men, but there are many girls today in the journalism school. So maybe it would be good to come up using quotas to bring them up to a certain number, because they are not just taking them in because they are women, they are taking them in because they are trained journalists. So in that case, I think that is fair in a society where society has been lacking, where many women were not yet in the profession. They did it in France, for example, with black people. At first, in many Western media, there were no blacks, even though France has a long history in Africa. And it was to right the wrong You cannot have people who are part of your population with French passports and they've been to journalism school and they are not journalists. They never see them on the screen. They only do. So France used the quotas to bring the number up. But they were not just saying, okay, let's just find a black guy on the street and put them in the radio. No. So I'm for quotas. I'm for quotas, especially in third world countries where many women don't have the chance. But when it reaches a certain, when they think that the number has reached an acceptable level, then I think they should stop it. Because if it keeps on going on at the detriment of the boys, then it doesn't, I start to think again that then they're still saying that we are the weaker sex. We are not good enough. So they can only use quotas for us to come to the job. It's the same thing we're talking about leaders. It's like today, the Thai Prime Minister winning an election. Am I very proud that a woman has won? No, I'm not very proud. Because she's using the shadow of her brother, Thaksin. I would have loved that she was a politician, that everybody knew she was a politician, and everybody saw her political career, and then she wins an election. But nobody knew her. 2 months ago, nobody knew who this lady was. But she uses her brother's name and comes into politics. It's the same thing in France with Ségolène Royal. She almost won an election 4 years back. Not because she had stood up for elections and said, okay, I will do my political career. No, she was the partner of the head of the Socialist Party. And then it was only during the election she suddenly separated from him and said, I'm also a candidate. But I will prefer politicians like Angela Merkel from Germany. Everybody can see a clear political cut. These are people you can see their political career. So maybe in the CA assembly right now, they did quotas because there were not many women. But by the next elections, when Nepal finally gets its constitution, I don't think those quotas will apply anymore.
Nowadays, women empowerment is most used word, but many people perceive it only in a more economical context. What is your take on it?
I think when we talked about it the first time, I also said it should start at home. I think in the job site today, every man is very aware that you cannot treat a female colleague just anyhow. There's a lot of harassment cases, even here in Nepal. I've been to courts where some women have complained that people have not been treating them well. And I think we saw some cases here where instead it was even the women. It showed you women empowerment. I remember there was a CA member or a minister one time, she used her handbag to beat a guy up in one district because he had not sent the car when she was arriving or something. So women empowerment, for me, it has to do a lot. But I always feel there should be a consensus. When you meet somebody in terms of brothers and sisters, which is a clear example, it will also start from the parents. It's not that the boy